My parents disowned me for marrying a black man. Years later, he became the only reason they survived, and they never even knew it. I used to be the kind of woman who always colored inside the lines. I grew up in a small, conservative town where I learned all the unspoken rules: how to dress for Sunday service, what to say at potlucks, and most importantly, who was considered acceptable to bring home. All of that started to fall apart the day I met him. He wasn't what my parents expected. Or rather, he was everything they feared. He was tall, soft-spoken, had deep brown skin, a sharp mind, and this quiet, steady strength that filled a room without trying to. He worked as a structural engineer, but to me, he built something much more important: a space where I could be honest, unfiltered, and finally seen. We met in the city, far away from the front porches and judgmental stares of my hometown. It started as a polite chat at a community fundraiser, turned into a 6-hour walk through the park, then a routine, and then a life. I knew what it would mean to tell my parents. I rehearsed that conversation for weeks, trying to find the softest way to deliver the news. But no matter how much you prepare, you're never really ready. When I told them I was engaged, my mother's first words were, "To who?" When I answered, she just said his name like it didn't belong in her mouth. My father didn't say a word. He just stood up and walked out of the room. My mother didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked at me like I was a stranger and said, coldly, "We raised you better than this." That was the last time I saw them in person. The wedding was small. No flowers. No card. Not even a call to say, "We won't be coming." I expected some coldness, but nothing prepared me for the silence that followed. They blocked my number. Family friends stopped replying to my messages. Even my cousin, who I once imagined would be a bridesmaid in my wedding, sent a vague text and never followed up. I cried for weeks after the wedding. Not because I regretted my choice, never that. But because in the world I came from, there was no room for both love and family. He never said a bad word about them. Not once. He made me tea when I sobbed at night. He cooked when I didn't have the strength to stand. He rubbed my back in silence while I stared at childhood photos, wondering if I'd ever hear my mother's voice again. "They don't know me," he said once, gently, as we sat on the fire escape watching the sun set between buildings. "But you do. That's enough for me." We built a life in the quiet. A modest 2-bedroom apartment on a tree-lined street at the edge of the city. I went back to teaching middle school English. He picked up freelance projects and mentored younger engineers on weekends. We weren't rich, but we were full. Not flashy, but deeply happy. Still, the silence from my parents lingered like a low hum in the background. Every holiday, I sent them cards. On their birthdays, I mailed flowers with handwritten notes. Never once did I get a reply. But I kept sending them anyway, because a part of me still believed that love, if offered long enough and sincerely enough, might one day be received. And through it all, he stayed beside me. No pressure, no judgment. Just presence. Eventually, I stopped crying. The pain didn't vanish. It softened, like a scar I learned to carry. With each year, our life felt more like home. I never imagined that one day, the very people who turned their backs would end up depending on the man they once rejected. But life has a funny way of circling back, quietly, without warning, placing kindness in the hands of those who once received none. The years passed like gentle waves. We settled into a rhythm. Two people who once felt like outsiders, now firmly rooted in a life we created. There were no dramatic turns. No huge wins. Just soft mornings, steady work, and little joys: pancakes on Sundays, late-night documentaries, shared glances that said more than words ever could. Every December, I bought the same holiday cards my parents used to send, gold pine cones and the words peace and blessings in script. And every year, I wrote a version of the same message. "We're doing well. I hope you are too. You're in my thoughts." I sealed the envelope, placed a kiss of hope on it, and mailed it to the same address. It never came back, but nothing ever came from it either. Then, one random Tuesday afternoon, a letter came in the mail. It had been forwarded from an old P.O. box I kept, just in case. I opened it absent-mindedly, expecting junk mail or a coupon. It was from a hospital near my hometown. The letter was cold and clinical. My father had suffered a stroke. My mother's health had sharply declined. There were notes about unpaid bills, insurance problems, and financial strain. The hospital was trying to find next of kin. I read it again, hoping the words might change. But they didn't. That night, I sat at the kitchen table while he cooked dinner. The smell of onions filled the air, but it couldn't cover the noise in my head. "I got something today," I said quietly. He turned, wiping his hands on a towel. "Yeah?" I slid the letter across the table. He read it once, then again. His expression barely changed, but I could see the weight settle in his eyes. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "Part of me wants to go down there, and part of me doesn't." He nodded slowly. Then he sat beside me, folding the letter neatly in his hands. After a pause, he spoke. "If it were me," he said, "I'd want someone to care, even if I didn't deserve it." I blinked back, the tears burning in my eyes. "But they don't even know you. They never tried." "They didn't try to know me," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." I nodded, silently. He reached for my hand, our fingers naturally finding each other. "Whatever you choose," he said, "I'm with you." What I didn't know then, what he never told me, was that he had already made a choice. That night when I went to bed early, he stayed up. I remember rolling over and seeing the glow of his desk lamp still on. He was sitting there, quietly, eyes scanning hospital directories. He never said a word about it. Just sat there, calling billing offices, offering help like it was nothing. No name, no drama, just a soft voice on the other end of the line solving problems for people who once shut him out. Week after week, he kept going. Bills disappeared. Equipment showed up at their house. Co-payments were waived. A physical therapist came by regularly. No one ever knew where the help was coming from. No one guessed that it was from the man they once refused to acknowledge. He never asked for anything. Not a receipt. Not a thank you. He wasn't doing it for recognition. It was like he was planting flowers in a garden he'd never walk through, just because someone should. Just because dignity matters. Meanwhile, I kept waiting. For a letter, maybe. A call. Some kind of sign that they noticed something had changed. And then one afternoon, my phone lit up. Unknown number. I hesitated but picked up. It was her. Her voice was soft. Hesitant. I think someone's been helping us." There was a pause. Then, "Was it you?" My heart skipped. "Helping with what?" I asked. "Your father's care, the bills. Someone's doing something." I looked over at him. He was folding laundry, calm and quiet, like he always was. "No," I said honestly. "Not me." And it wasn't. Not directly. But I looked at him, and something in me just shifted. Whatever they said or did from this point on, I already knew the truth. I had married someone whose kindness didn't need to be acknowledged to exist. And I hoped one day, they'd see it too. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into quiet, ordinary months. I kept going, grading essays, making tea, folding clothes next to him in the calm silence that always felt warm, never empty. And slowly, something changed. They started feeling relief. It began small. A bill vanished. Then another. Red ink and overdue notices replaced with quiet, paid-in-full statements. Specialists came. Not just one, two. For his rehab. No charges. The clinic figured insurance must have handled it. Then the medications. Delivered right to the door. Little white bags. Prepaid. No more arguments about cost. Her voice, skeptical as always, called the hospital billing office. They bounced her around until someone mentioned something vague, third-party support, anonymous donor. But no names. He never asked questions. Just took his pills. Sat quietly near the window. Eyes far away. Then one Thursday, I got back from the grocery store. Apples still in the bag. I saw a voicemail on my phone. Her. I froze. Hit play. "Claire, thank you. For whatever you did. That's all." Click. That was it. I stood there in the kitchen. Still holding a bag of apples. The fridge humming like it was the only thing alive in the room. Whatever you did. But I hadn't done anything. I hadn't lifted a finger. I wanted to. I thought about it. But I hadn't. I walked into the living room. He was there, reading, glasses low on his nose. "I got a message," I said. He looked up. From my mom. His eyebrows raised. She said, "Thank you. For something. I don't know what she thinks I did." There was a pause. One of those long, honest silences that sits between people who know each other too well. He took off his glasses. Set them down gently. And then he said, "Maybe someone just wanted to help." I looked at him. "It was you, wasn't it?" He didn't say yes. He didn't need to. That smile, small, barely there, but real. "Why?" I whispered. His answer was so simple. "Because you still cared. Even when they didn't." I didn't cry. Not then. Not that night, either. I just lay there in bed beside him, my fingers moving across his chest like I was tracing all the parts of him I hadn't fully seen until now. They thought he was the one who would take me away. But he didn't take anything. He held me up. He gave me back the parts of myself they had tried to crush. And now, quietly, without ever asking to be seen, he had given something to them they never earned. Mercy. Over the next few days, I started watching him differently. Not because I doubted him, but because I was finally starting to understand the full weight of the man I married. He didn't just give love. He gave it without asking for anything back. Even to people who wouldn't say his name. I never told them the truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Let them think it was fate. Or a stranger's kindness. Let the mystery linger in that quiet house like a question they'd never answer. What mattered was what I knew, what I lived with every day. That real love doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause. It just shows up. It does the hard thing. And then it disappears. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special. I was in the teacher's lounge sipping coffee that tasted like cardboard when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Almost. But something told me to answer. "Hello? Hi, is this?" "Yes." "This is from Bayage Medical. I'm calling regarding billing adjustments for your parents' file." My heart jumped. My parents? Yes. We're finalizing paperwork related to a third-party account that's been covering expenses. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what account?" There was a pause. Then the woman's voice softened. "Oh, I apologize. We were under the impression this was done with your consent. The bills have all been paid through the support fund. That's the name listed on the foundation." My throat tightened. "There's a foundation?" "Yes. Fully verified. Private funds. Registered under." She said his full name. I couldn't breathe. I mumbled something like "thank you" and ended the call, but nothing felt real. I stood up so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. That night, the apartment was quiet again. Soft jazz playing in the background. He was in the kitchen, slicing vegetables, steady and calm like always. I walked in slowly, holding my coat in one hand and my phone in the other. "You started a foundation in our name," I said, my voice shaking. "You've been paying for their care," she said, voice trembling. "Every bill. Every doctor. Every visit." He set the knife down. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain. He didn't reach for a speech. He just nodded, once, gently. "I didn't do it for them," he said, calm and steady. "I did it for you." Her breath caught. "You loved them," he continued, "even after they walked away. I saw that. Every holiday card you sent. Every quiet night you stared out the window, hoping they'd call. I couldn't fix the past. But I could make sure that love didn't go unanswered." She shook her head, eyes wet. "But they hurt you. They didn't even try to know you. How could you still help them?" He stepped closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Because I know what kind of daughter you've been," he said. "And I love the way you love. Fierce. Loyal. Even when it hurts." Her knees gave out before she could stop them, and she sank into the nearest chair, tears spilling down her cheeks. She wept, not just for what he had done, but for everything he had carried. Quietly. Without resentment. Without asking for anything. He knelt beside her, one hand resting gently on her back. "They may never say thank you," he whispered. "But you don't need their words to know what's right." She buried her face in her hands. She wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because, for the first time, she saw him fully. Not just the man who stood beside her in hard moments, but the man who gave compassion where it hadn't been earned, who chose love not because it was returned, but because it was who he was. And somewhere deep inside her, something settled. A truth she had always believed, but now could finally see. Real love doesn't wait for permission. It just acts, quietly, powerfully, without condition. Later that night, she sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights flicker like faraway stars. He brought her tea and sat beside her. Their hands found each other without a word. She looked at him and simply said, "Thank you." He squeezed her hand. "Anytime," he replied. And he meant it. It took her 2 weeks to make the decision. Not because she was afraid. Not because she wasn't ready. But because she wanted to be sure her reasons weren't rooted in anger or grief or some hope for closure that might never come. In the end, she didn't go to reconcile. She went to speak one truth. The drive back to that town felt familiar and foreign all at once. The same roads. The same quiet fields. The same old porch swing creaking in the wind like time had stood still. But everything inside her had changed. She parked in front of the house she hadn't seen in years, a house that once held birthday cakes, bedtime stories, and Sunday dinners, before silence moved in and made itself at home. The door opened. There was grey in her mother's hair now. Her frame was smaller than she remembered. They stood there for a moment too long, suspended in uncertainty. Then she spoke, softly. "I'm not here to fight. I just want to say something." Her mother stepped aside. Inside, the house was quiet. Dim, it smelled faintly of mint tea and dust. Her father sat in the same chair he always had, a blanket over his knees. He looked thinner somehow, but heavier too, like regret had settled in his bones. She remained standing. "I'm not here because you changed," she began, steady. "I'm here because I did." Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't waver. "You pushed me away for loving him. But here's the reason you're still standing. He's the one who paid the bills. Who made sure you got care. Who never once asked for thanks." Her mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. She turned to her father. He didn't look at her at first. Then slowly, he did. There was no speech. No long apology. Just a pause. And then a whisper. "We were wrong." That was it. No hugs. No tears. No tidy ending. But for her, those 3 words said more than any apology ever could. She didn't stay for coffee. She didn't linger. She walked back to the car, opened the door, and didn't look back. He didn't ask what they said when she came home. He met her at the door, pulled her into his arms, and held her until she could breathe again. They didn't need to talk about it. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from what others say. Sometimes it comes from knowing, deep down, you did what was right. Months passed. Life returned to its soft, steady rhythm. She didn't reconnect with them. Not really. But something inside her had softened. Not fully healed, but not aching anymore, like scar tissue that no longer hurt when touched. One evening, she was curled up on the couch with him, scrolling through headlines, when an idea sparked. "What if there was a place," she said, "for people like us? For couples who've had to choose love over approval?" He looked over. What kind of place? A space to talk, to process, to remind each other they're not alone. He didn't hesitate. "Let's build it." That's how the Unbroken Circle was born. A support group for couples and families divided by racial bias. A space where love came first, pain was acknowledged, and no one had to hide their hurt behind smiles. She led the sessions. He never took the spotlight, but every chair, every flyer, every child care voucher was paid for through a quiet trust he created behind the scenes. He never wanted credit. He just wanted change. And slowly, word began to spread, not about who they were, but what they did. People whispered, not about race or resentment, but about compassion. About a man who never raised his voice, and a woman who never stopped believing love was worth fighting for. They didn't become heroes. They didn't want to. They became something else. A quiet example, not of perfection, but of perseverance. So yeah, sometimes love doesn't shout, it just shows up, does the right thing, and leaves the rest to grace. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet love. I'll see you in the next one.